Stop with the questions. Celebrate.
And then they say, is Donald Trump an intellectual? Trust me, I'm like a smart person. Yosemite's one of the wettest we've ever seen from the standpoint of water.
Mike Lindell's a conspiracy.
Well, you haven't. Person, woman, man, camera, TV. They said nobody gets it in order. It's actually not that easy, but for me it was easy.
Amazing.
He can't sit down. He's got a burning in his butthole. He's got a fire. He's got a flame coming out of his butthole.
Big, massive dumps.
Oh, I have a term for that. I call it corporate communism.
Somebody sent me a thing this morning where they're talking about putting the vaccine into salad dressing.
You see, this is a simple meme that you would find on the internet, but this meme is very real.
You ain't seen nothing yet until you see the flaming butthole.
Putting us on our knees to China.
Now witness the firepower of this fully armed and operational battle station.
Uh-oh, I'm in trouble.
Around the nation, Waldorf Nation. Hey everybody, welcome to the show. Wednesday, midweek, hump day, but we've got a good show for you today. So now, we're going to talk about some of the reaction from Joe Biden's State of the Union speech. Specifically, of course, Republicans saying insane things about it. And of course, the live reactions from Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert. Fun times. We have the evil plot revealed by the Democrats to win the midterms. Not my wording on that. But you know, we're gonna talk about that. That's a fun video. We have defund the police. Turns out, oh, it looks like there's people lying about that. Big surprise. We got Madison Cawthorn being Madison Cawthorn. Ron DeSantis versus masks and masked students. And of course, fun story, Florida man. The Florida man. It's been a while since we did a Florida man story here. All right. So that said, let's dive into it here. Before we do, please like and share the stream. Very important that you do so. Helps out the show, as always. And I really, really appreciate it. That said, let's do it. Let's dive in.
A cancer that would put them in a flag draped coffin. I know. One of those soldiers was my son, Major Beau Biden.
All right, so what you saw there was a little bit of Joe Biden's State of the Union speech. Now, what you had heard is Representative Lauren Boebert heckling the president. This is no surprise. Republicans have been heckling the president during their speech all the way back to Obama when Walsh had said, you lie. But this time, this was about 13 people that were killed in Afghanistan. So now Boebert, along with Marjorie Taylor Greene, spent most of the night yelling things and making faces, because that's what adults do, right? That's what functional, normal, regular people do during a speech. And of course, look, they basically annoyed everyone there A lot of the stuff that they said was, or at least when it comes to Marjorie Taylor Greene, nobody could tell what they were saying for the most part. But I want to show you some pictures here that reporters had snapped during some of their outbursts. That's a good one. I love that picture. There's this one. And of course, my favorite. Yes. Great. Once again, very normal, well-adjusted adults in this room. Well, now, again, let me go into detail here about the 13 service members, because you know what? Turns out that is important, because they did die during the Afghanistan withdrawal. So obviously, that's a monumental tragedy. However, leaving Afghanistan, number one, was Donald Trump's idea. Number two, I agree with it. I thought it was a good thing that we left what was the forever war in Afghanistan, 20 years of nonstop war and violence and people dying, American service members dying. And so, look, if we had stayed, and this kind of shows you like how you really can't win in these situations. Had Joe Biden violated Donald Trump's agreement, for one, that would have been disastrous. And of course, they would have criticized him for that. And then on top of that, more American servicemen and women would have died. And so I'm saying that's really the problem with occupations and why we shouldn't get into bullshit wars in the first place. And so, look, there's that. Again, no-win situation here. And by the way, if you do actually have substantive criticism towards Biden for voting for the authorization of military force during the Bush administration, well, that actually is fair game. That is substantive criticism. And certainly we have criticized him on this show about that. That said, that's not what Lauren Boebert was doing. That's not what Marjorie Taylor Greene was doing. No, they were just taking cheap shots. And it sort of is pathetic. It's really indicative of what that wing of the Republican Party seems to be all about. Substantive criticism was 100% fine. I think that should be absolutely encouraged. And if you bring up a real issue here, then yes, I think that is deserving of conversation. But once again, this is criticism that was not done in good faith. It was very bad faith criticism. And so just another way, a stunt to try to get attention. That whole night, Boebert and Greene were essentially tossing out nonsense. But there was one part where they actually did sort of agree with the president, and that's when Biden had said that, you know what we need to do? We need to secure the border. So Greene, during that, had yelled, "Build the wall." No, yes, build the wall, build the wall. Now that's a reference to Donald Trump's failed border wall. Now, look, there's a ton of reasons why a wall doesn't work. I've explained that. For one, you can fly over it, you can tunnel under it, you can go around it. This is not 1500 BC, where a wall would generally protect you from invading armies. That does not work anymore. Okay, not only would it be incredibly ineffective, but also expensive and just very, very dumb. Very dumb. There are other ways, of course, to deal with immigration. For example, we could reform our immigration system. That would be nice. And also, hey, we could do things that aren't just centered around the United States. We could actually help make the conditions in Central America not so horrible so that people, wouldn't have to flee their homes. We could maybe stop overthrowing leftist leaders in South America for their natural resources. We literally did it once over bananas. We could end the drug war, which would reduce the demand for drugs and profits, and of course reduce the profits for drug smugglers. Maybe we could, try to stabilize regions in these countries, maybe with some funding, to help them build up their public services. Stuff like that. And maybe that's a couple of ideas. I don't know if they'll work, but at least it's better than what Lauren Boebert and Marjorie Taylor Greene can seem to come up with, because they have nothing. Again, if you want to tackle or stop, illegal immigration, or at least most of it, well then you got to go after the root cause. Nobody seems to understand that. Nobody seems to get it. Why is that? Well, for their part, I think it's mostly due to racism. You asked Marjorie Taylor Greene, and really, the answer generally tends to be something along the lines of, and it's not so open, but it generally comes down to, why should we help dirty brown people? And that's what they do. Okay. But of course, what they miss by being racist morons is that immigration actually helps the country. Immigration, good. Why? It helps economic growth. It helps opportunity. It adds rich culture to America, to the United States. And by the way, I don't just mean food, but you've got holidays, you've got celebrations, you've got ideas, arts, music, dress, styles of dress, all that stuff. Other cultures are enriching. And so, but understand that people like Boebert and Green have small little minds, small little fearful minds. They have such little confidence in their own culture and ideals that they're afraid that other cultures will come up and subsume them. And by the way, it is quite hilarious for them to go and claim that, no, it's our culture that's superior. Really, if your culture was so superior, then why are you afraid of the so-called lesser cultures coming in and destroying yours? Weird. No, give me a break. Honestly, hey, hold on. Hit it, Jeb.
Give me a break.
Okay. Look, this entire thing was a sad little display from people who are so desperate for attention and have absolutely no real solutions, no policy positions at all to help the people that they claim to represent. And so, once again, their whole thing is to fall back on fear and hatred and being just generally terrible people. As Hunger Games 1989 also points out, most of the illegal immigrants also come in on visas and by planes and overstay their visas. Yeah. Very, very true. All right. Moving on, let's get to the next story. Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene believes that the Democrats have created a nefarious new plot to win the midterms. Here she is explaining it.
He's going to claim victory over COVID. And if he does that, then you'll know the Democrats are lying. You'll know for sure, like we've already known all along, that they're just using COVID for politics. And they're very much looking to move on and create happiness going into the midterms because they're scared to death of losing control when everyone goes to vote.
Oh my God. Did you hear that? Did you hear that? The Democrats, their plan is to create happiness. Happiness for the voters. How dare they? How dare they even attempt to create happiness? No, look, that's ridiculous. All right. So to get on her COVID point, right? So look, the Omicron variant, which is now the chief variant here, that is, I think it's like 90% of the cases of COVID now, is if you are vaccinated and boosted, well, you're going to do pretty well. Now, it's a big problem if you're not vaccinated, not boosted, or are immunocompromised. That can still be quite deadly. Now, the thing about Omicron is that we've found out that it spreads very quickly, but if you are vaccine boosted, it's not nearly as lethal as it is Delta. It doesn't, basically, it's not as severe, doesn't cause a severe sickness or illness in people who are vaxxed and boosted. And so, okay. Now, in fact, let me give you some information on that. The CDC, according to a study in January, said that it proved compelling evidence of an intrinsically less severe infection from the variant that currently accounts for 90% of the cases in the US. Now, that said, I'm not ready to declare like victory over it, right? No, you still have people that are dying. You have still people that are still getting sick, many more that are dealing with long COVID. All of that stuff does need to be addressed. We're not out of the woods yet. But generally speaking, you know, if you're vaccinated, boosted, and you don't have any immunocompromised issues, you can generally go back to living your life. So, I mean, that's good. Now, in that case, though, this is bad for Marjorie Taylor Greene and the rest of the Republican Party, because you have many on the right whose entire shtick is, and this was true throughout the entire pandemic, about how government mandates, vaccine mandates, which, by the way, we don't have any, mask mandates, which are being removed incredibly quickly throughout the country. Well, you know, we're facing tyranny. It's 1984. It's 1984. And by the way, this is also, since this, you know, the whole talking point is like half tyranny and also, oh, COVID, it's not really a big thing. It's an overreaction. And by the way, not only is it an overreaction, but it's also incredibly deadly if you don't have horse paste. And so this is a flu hoax. You should get back to work, but also, again, incredibly dangerous. Their reaction to this is incredibly schizophrenic. And that's, of course, not to demean anybody who has actual schizophrenia or anything like that. But it's just, it's all over the place. You can't pin it down. And that ambiguity of the message really does make it easy for people to grift. And that's what Marjorie Taylor Greene has been doing. And the right wing, they've been grifting off of this pandemic, I should say mandate hysteria. Again, we don't actually have mandates. And so, you know, they are claiming, though, that this is absolute and utter tyranny. The government has taken over your lives and will use this to further erode your freedom, which, again, we're not seeing any evidence of that. And so, but that's the thing. Now, before I get to more, let me just also say that we should make sure that every other country can get the vaccine. We should release the patents, because while we're doing better here in the United States and in Western countries, there are countries in Africa that still have incredibly low vaccination rates. So we're not done with this stuff. The world is not done with this stuff, and we need to make sure to do everything we can to export the vaccine or release the patents. We should definitely release the patents here, and so they can make their own vaccine and get their enough of their citizenry to be vaccinated and boosted as well, so that we don't have another disastrous variant. So now, that said, Big Pharma, not likely to do that. Pharmaceutical companies love their profits, but that we know. But here's the thing. Getting back to Marjorie Taylor Greene, if people are no longer as concerned about COVID in the United States, and of course that's reflected by governments removing a lot of their COVID-19 protocols, well then, okay, the so-called tyranny of wearing a mask, well, in the supermarket, that's no longer there. So where does that leave Republicans? Well, they can't fundraise off of it anymore. They can't fearmonger it off it anymore. And so that's the issue here. So now Marjorie Taylor Greene comes back and says, well, it's projection. It's all, you know, or basically she comes back and projects all over and says, well, COVID-19, it was just a political hoax. That's all it was. Now, wait a minute. It's the Republican Party that politicized COVID as the big government hoax takeover of everyone's lives in 1984, all rolled into one, and probably Soylent Green added in there. I don't know. Again, this was a real pandemic. It required real solutions, vaccines, temporary safety measures, masks and social distancing, lockdowns, support for people, regular workers, you know, through government like benefits, like unemployment benefits, like freezing rents, things like that. Those were really important. And so now I criticize the government for that lack of support. We didn't have as much support as other countries had given their citizens. You know, a $1,400 check should have been a $2,000 check. should have been a monthly $2,000 check during that whole time period, or at least, when Biden got in office, it should have been retroactive. We didn't get any of that stuff, okay, for the people that actually needed it. That said, again, I criticize him for that, criticize the government for that. I criticize the CDC for having some inconsistent messaging. That's totally fair. And of course, the massive criticism of some of the COVID legislation that had gone on through both administrations that gave massive handouts to the rich and corporations. A lot of criticism there. That said, you don't see legitimate criticism of this coming from Marjorie Taylor Greene or Republicans. Once again, they have massively politicized the pandemic and, allowed for so much more death than was, a lot of this death could have been avoidable, but they used it, politicized it, all for their own gains. It's really gross. Right now you have the freedom truckers, right? Freedom truckers are out there railing against the non-existent mandates, and they're wondering why nobody cares, why everybody's paying attention to Ukraine instead of them. Well, obviously, the reason is very obvious. We don't have those mandates anymore. And Ukraine is incredibly important. But again, let's move on to the happiness, right? The happiness. Kind of a weird thing to get mad about. The Democrats have this plan to create happiness for the midterms so they can actually win. I can't believe the other political party wants you to feel happy. Oh, and? Is she saying the Republicans would rather you feel angry and hate yourself and then take it out on an immigrant? I know that sounds like hyperbole, but right now, the Republican base is largely fueled by rage and disgust and hatred of other people. At least the Trump wing is. Well, one last thing. I don't think it's a problem to create happiness among your voters. In fact, that's kind of how you win, right? And so, look, if the Democrats actually chose to do that, that would be fantastic. You know how you do that? Well, you do things that are popular and actually improve the material conditions of people's lives. Now, look, one of my criticisms is that the Democrats haven't really done that. We don't have guaranteed paid leave. We don't have guaranteed child care. We don't have anyone that has lowered the cost of prescription drugs. In fact, prescription drugs have increased in price, among many, many other things. And so, corporations have been price gouging people, during this pandemic, blaming it on, just solely on inflation and government spending. And so, it's almost as if, though, the people that are are in a position to actually do something about this, to do these popular things, both Democrats and Republicans, don't seem to want to do it. Now, and I'm, of course, speaking about corporate Democrats in Congress that have sided with Republicans to block the Biden agenda that would have actually done some of these things, that would have been guaranteed paid leave, that would have helped the material conditions of people's lives. Yeah, Marjorie Taylor Greene on that team, along with pretty much the entire Republican Party that has blocked any of these very popular policy positions from getting enacted that would actually make people happy. It's weird how that works. Again, I wish the Democratic Party would be able to pass these things. I wish, they would have gotten rid of the filibuster, or, have Biden, because there's a lot of power in executive orders. For example, when the pandemic was there, he could have used emergency powers to ensure everyone has Medicare for all. He could still cancel student loan debt. I don't think they're going to do that. And that's why I don't think Democrats are going to do very well in the midterms. They didn't deliver on a lot of promises that they had promised during the campaigns. And so that's a completely different thing. That doesn't mean, of course, that Republicans will do anything better. They won't. Spoiler alert, they'll do worse. They don't give a damn about making your lives better. That is unless you're a giant corporation. If you're a regular person, if you're a working person, you're not going to be at the table when it comes to Republicans. And a lot of the corporate Democrats also, I think we've all noticed that we're also not at the table. And the result is, of course, that's a result of corporate capture of the government. But my point is, if you do want to win elections, then yes, you should do things that make people happy. Do things that people like, populism. It's not a nefarious plot. It is economic populism, and both parties should try it sometime. Be real nice. Be cool if you did. All right. All right. On Tuesday, President Joe Biden delivered his first State of the Union speech, first addressing the situation that's going on in Ukraine, before delving into domestic policy, including policing. In fact, I've got a video here where he is calling for more funding of the police.
We should all agree the answer is not to defund the police. It's to fund the police. Fund them. Fund them. Fund them with resources and training. Resources and training they need to protect our communities.
All right, so now, why did he bring this up? Why do I bring this up? Well, apparently there seems to be a narrative on the right, and you're going to see an example of that in just a minute. But apparently a lot of them claim that Joe Biden wants to defund the police. Now, before I get into that, I think we should. Now, wait, hold on. That doesn't mean getting rid of police. It means not arming them with high-tech military-grade weapons and equipment, and actually taking some of the funding and putting it towards the community in crime prevention programs. Now remember, police, their job isn't to stop crime. No, they show up literally after a crime is committed, and they're supposed to find those people and arrest them and introduce them into the justice system. Police were never meant to be Judge Dredd. Now, there's a handful of Democrats that do agree with me, not that many. That's not the majority of the party. For example, you've got Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Ilhan Omar, Representative Cori Bush, Rashida Tlaib, Jamal Bowman, Marcia Fudge, and a couple of others. But let me be clear. Let me be very, very clear. Defunding the police was never a policy position of Joe Biden. He has never promised to defund the police. In fact, Joe Biden was a man who pushed the '94 crime bill that actually led to mass incarceration. He was very tough on crime. That was his idea. Again, not somebody who was in favor of defunding the police. So, that said, I'm going to show you a video here. This is Fox News. This is the brain trust over at Fox and Friends saying that Biden suddenly done a 180 on defunding the police. Take a look.
Why has the administration and all the Democrats done a 180? Because it's an election year. And because the polling shows that defund the police was perhaps one of the dumbest slogans in political history. And now they've got to dig themselves out before the first Tuesday in November.
Yeah, I mean, that's why a lot of people are cynical when it comes to most people when it comes to things like the CDC. Why are the masks coming off? Because it's an election year. Why are the police suddenly funded? It's an election year. Why do we talk about securing the border? Well, it's an election year. Right. Why are we talking about inflation? It's an election year and it's hitting everybody, but there's no answers that they provide.
I love how he talks about, oh, it's the mask coming off, right? The Republicans have pulled the masks off quite some time, and I don't mean COVID masks. Wow. All right. So first, it's hilarious how wrong that is. It's just wrong. It's not factual. And by the way, on some of the other points, like, oh, it's an election year. Wait, are you accusing politicians of playing politics? Oh my God, that's scandalous. I am shocked that there is gambling in this establishment. Yeah, of course they're going to play politics. But this is not one of the situations where they are. Look, Joe Biden is doing a reaffirmation of something that the Democratic Party has been doing, and which is funding the police. There's no truth to the claims of defunding. Anybody who claims that it is the mainstream position of the Democratic Party is simply lying to you. And again, I want to defund the police. I'm the one that's telling you, like, yeah, we should defund the police. But here's the thing, poll after poll, and I understand this is not a popular position. Voters don't agree with me. They disagree with me. Polls don't lie. Numbers don't lie. So I know I'm in the minority position, and they're right to point out that, yes, this is not a popular position among voters. So that said, Joe Biden has been consistent with his very pro-police stance, which fits in with the mainstream of Democratic voters. But I bring this up not because, I just want to disagree with Joe Biden and point out how Republicans are ridiculous and complete and utter hypocrites, and they also lie. But I think it's also important to point out how that we've done literally nothing on police reform at a federal level. There are some, localities that have done some that have gone in some directions and then have gone back in the other direction. We have had no big reform, no defunding. This is all status quo. That's it. We still, look, police are still killing unarmed black men. For example, Amir Locke was recently killed during a no-knock warrant. You also had a situation where former police officer Kim Potter got essentially a slap on the wrist for killing Dante Wright. You remember that? Outrage. And on and on and on. And so here you have a situation where it's essentially the same. No fundamental change, which again, that was Joe Biden's promise. Nothing will fundamentally change because he's not a change president. He's a get everything back to what it was before Trump president. And some of you, of course, might have voted for that. Some of you are like, yes, nailed it. That's exactly what we wanted. Well, I'm not one of those people. I think that there should have been a lot more change. That said, you also have situations where you have communities that have, schools that are barely able to afford enough supplies to educate their children. Whereas in those same communities, you have police budgets that have more than enough money for the community. So if you're going to keep pumping money into the cops, you should at least put some strings on it. Now, Joe Biden, he talked about, we're going to do some reform and we're going to do this, we're going to do that. Okay, well, don't say that after you've sent them the money. You know what I'm saying? I think that if you're going to do some money, if you're actually going to, fund the police, and there are some that are making the arguments saying that, well, look, yes, we should increase funding because that will allow them to make these big changes to reform the police. Okay, well, I don't see any evidence of that, and I could, of course, be wrong. But if you're going to do something, then send them money, have them do something. Maybe, have some strings attached to that funding. Maybe something simple as you must reduce the amount of unarmed people that are shot and killed. Something like that. Or maybe have them change. Like, hey, maybe you could, instead of having the taxpayer pay for police misconduct when they accidentally murder the wrong person, have it come out of the police pension fund. Or, one of my favorite things is get rid of qualified immunity. All I'm saying is that there are different things that you could do, so just do something. If you say you want reform, then do a little reform and make any increase in the police budgets dependent on that. Like, you actually have to do something. You have to do something. Now, unfortunately, what we've seen so far, and maybe this will change in the future, but right now it looks like they're getting funded all the money they could ever want, because you do have a slight increase in crime, right, as a result of conditions of the pandemic and afterwards, and inflation and all that different stuff. It looks like they're just getting funded. They're just getting money thrown at them again without any sort of accountability or reform. I'm looking forward to seeing what kind of maybe positions that Joe Biden puts up to try to change that. I hope he does. But at this point, I think it's a little bit of a naive hope based on what I've seen and the rhetoric before. So, yeah, again, I'm going to have a wait until I actually see it before I believe it stance on this one. Okay. Well, let's see. There's a good comment that I wanted to read here from the chat. I just have to wait for my chat to catch up. Okay, hold on. Let's see. The 1994 crime bill is why so many in the black community are no fans of Biden. That's true. And look, also, we have a situation where Biden, and I read an article earlier, how there are bigger voices in the black community that are saying, okay, there's a State of the Union, but, where's the focus on the African-American community? I just don't think he's been focusing enough on that community and their specific needs. And so that's fair criticism as well from a very, very reliable Democratic voting bloc. Let's see. Oh, yeah, there was, what is it? Demilitarize the police is a far more effective slogan. Yeah, I agree with that. And again, I agree that defund the police is a very easily misunderstood and misconstrued slogan for it. Because nobody seems to know what the word defund means. And some who absolutely know what it means and twist the meaning to mean something else. So, okay. That is not in the place where I wanted it. There we go. That looks a little better. And these are just flying by today. Oh, one more thing. We in the black community were once again used and pandered to. Without our voting bloc, Dems would lose. Once again, absolutely true on what you're saying. Okay. We have, nope, no video in this one. As the conflict rages on in Ukraine, the United States and Western powers are rushing in to send military and humanitarian aid to Kyiv as a huge Russian armored column bears down on the capital. So this column is no joke. It's like 40 miles long, filled with Russian artillery. So very, very dangerous situation. Now, Republicans, however, seem to be taking advantage of the situation by introducing weirdo bills that are very specific, that are trying to stymie the flow of that aid unless Biden secures the Mexican border. So now, of course, this was introduced by two different representatives. One of them is Madison Cawthorn. And of course, you have Matt Rosendale as well. They both introduced bills that mandate that the number of armed force members deployed to Ukraine must be less than the number deployed to the Mexican border. Well, good news, that number is 0. We're not sending boots on the ground. No American service members are going to Ukraine. Now, look, I'm against sending ground forces to Ukraine. The majority of the American people, I believe, are against that. You know why? Because that would start a war between the United States and Russia. And of course, not just Russia, but then you'd also have the rest of NATO getting involved, and it would be World War III. That would doom humanity if the entire thing went nuclear. So that's not a good thing. So no boots on the ground. And by the way, during President Biden's speech in the State of the Union, he reiterated, no boots on the ground. We are not getting involved in a ground war. So that said, this bill, nonsensical. Doesn't make any sense. It's a ridiculous bill. But it was a stunt. And why? Why do I say it's a stunt? Because he's just putting it up so he can say, look at me. I tried to fund the border. I tried to secure the border. Now, look, the Republican, again, we have the midterms coming up. Republicans are replaying the hits. They're doing the culture wars. At any moment, there's going to be a caravan. They're going to find a caravan of migrants that are coming towards the border. And by the way, there is a situation going on in the border. There's a lot of refugees. There's a lot of migrants that are, once again, fleeing these Central American countries. You've got the, fallout from the pandemic, of course. And you've got the same situations that were happening previous to the pandemic, where you have people that are being targeted by gangs, etc., and then you have crushing poverty, all that stuff. So you have refugees, you have migrants. Refugees, of course, have a legal right to plead their case inside the border. And now, unfortunately, the Biden response to this has been to continue to use Title 42. Which is a Trump-era policy. In fact, according to the Washington Post, even as the Biden administration continues to use the Trump-era public health rule to deter migration, people from Mexico and the Northern Triangle countries of El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras have crossed without authorization in high numbers for several consecutive months. In addition to the pandemic, 2 hurricanes have destroyed livelihoods and homes in Guatemala and Honduras, where extortion and violence from gangs have persisted in many communities, further fueling an exodus. So look, there are crossings. The number of people is high, incredibly high. But you got to understand why they make this trip. It's literally life and death for them. And that's what it is. Now, what's going on in Ukraine, also life and death. And so Cawthorn's response to this is incredibly cruel and heartless. Not only does he want less people to immigrate into the United States, less migrants to come here? And I understand that there is a strain on our immigration system, a strain on our borders. We could definitely do a lot of things to streamline that process, to make it easier. There just has to be some political will, etc. But look, he's trying to stop people from coming in, and he's using the situation in Ukraine to deny people, that are fighting for their country, fighting against Vladimir Putin, supplies, arms, weapons. So, now, normally, I don't like the idea of being the world's arms supplier. I have definitely criticized the United States on that front. In this case, though, this is an invasion of a sovereign country. These weapons are being basically sent to Ukraine to try to stop or put a halt to that Russian invasion. Vladimir Putin chose to invade, despite the Ukrainians trying to de-escalate, try to avoid the war. They even, Zelensky had been promised not to join NATO. But it didn't matter. All the promises in the world wouldn't have stopped Vladimir Putin from going into the country. Because that was the plan all along in order to seize Ukraine. And so now, The one thing that I do have issues with, of course, and rightly, people do bring it up, the Azov Battalion. Now, that's the neo-Nazi unit that is part of the Ukrainian defense. They're neo-Nazis. Now, they're a small group of neo-Nazis. They're part of the official Ukrainian Defense Forces. That doesn't mean that the entire Ukrainian defense is neo-Nazis. That's ridiculous. That doesn't mean that Ukraine is run by neo-Nazis. Again, there's no evidence of that. But at the same time, I don't like that these weapons will end up in their hands. I'm against that. Inevitably, that's going to happen. That sucks. But at the same time, they're arming the rest of the Ukrainian army against this Russian aggression. And so it is what it is. But that said, let's go to Cawthorn here. Molly Jong Fast, responding to this, wrote, quote, "This is pretty gross, but it's also very stupid. I'm surprised Louis Gohmert isn't involved in this." Well, you look, gone are the days where Louis Gohmert was the dumbest person in office. The dumbest Republican. Now, political scientist and professor of international relations Dave Rothkopf also tweeted this, quote, I just can't. Some noted that Putin had earlier in the day bombed a Holocaust memorial site, which is a possible war crime, and a TV tower in Kyiv. The Holocaust site honored 33,000 Jews that Hitler had murdered there, which is actually one of the sites of the largest Nazi slaughters of the Jewish people. So, hey, look at that. For a denazification campaign, they seem to be targeting, I don't know, Jewish Holocaust remembrance sites. Now, one more here, and this is another tweet saying, nobody is better at doing despicable, nonsensical, performative garbage than Trump cult members that happen to be elected officials. Unfortunately, that is correct. Did Gohmert ask if we could crash the moon into Russia? Man, you know, it's funny. I haven't heard as much from Louis Gohmert. Once again, it's people that are even dumber that take the oxygen out of the room. We haven't had a good Louis Gohmert story in a long time. Ever since, what was it, the gay people can't go to space because then how will they procreate? Like, are you serious, Louis? What kind of dumb shit? Anyway, okay, let's move on. We got Ron DeSantis going after kids. Fun. Here we are. Wanted to use the moon to change the tides. Tides go in, tides come out. You can't explain that. You can explain that, Louis. Jesus. Okay. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis got a little bit testy today. In fact, here's some video of him scolding a group of children for daring to wear a mask.
You do not have to wear those masks. I mean, please take them off. Honestly, it's not doing anything, and we got to stop with this COVID theater. So if you want to wear it, fine, but this is ridiculous.
Yes. Nothing says freedom than telling people to take off their mask. Now they don't do anything anyway. Just take them off. This is ridiculous. This is ridiculous. You know, it's funny. I don't exactly think that we should be taking medical advice from someone who just a month earlier sounded like this.
Manufacturing is something that we need to do better job of. And we've worked really hard in Florida to have more opportunities with vocational education. We have expanded our manufacturing footprint in the state of Florida, and we want to continue to be able to do that as we go forward. We are overly dependent on foreign nations, including Taiwan, which is a good ally of ours, but which is one that, is under really serious pressure.
You want to talk about pressure? I mean, imagine, like, that guy's lungs sounded like they were under a great ton of pressure at that time. Just wow. Now, of course, obviously, he seems to have gotten quite better. Well, good for him. Now, hey, maybe that's because of all the medications, you know, the life-saving medication that he had access to because he's a wealthy person, a wealthy governor, you know. But anyway, I love how it's freedom. I love how it's freedom. Except not if you choose to wear a mask. By the way, props to the one kid who's still wearing a mask. See, you know what's up. You know what's up. But hey, look, freedom to wear a mask, sure. But if you want to, because you're still rightly concerned about Omicron, which does spread quickly and very easily and still can kill those who are not vaccinated, boosted, or have, you know, compromised immune systems, the governor will literally tell you to take that thing off. How about go fuck yourself, you weirdo, and stop telling the children to take off the mask? It's so incredibly strange. And look, here's the thing. They're not harming anybody by wearing a mask. They're just not. But, oh, of course, he can't do that because they're going to stand right behind him. And he's got to have his good PR picture. See, he's got to have his good image of like, oh, I'm the freedom guy and everybody in Florida wants to be free. I'm free of these masks. Well, wearing a mask, I mean, obviously contradictory to that message. Yes. No, it's just, this is BS culture war bullshit, which I just basically repeated myself on that, but it's not surprising. Y'all remember Ron DeSantis and what he did during the Omicron peak, and before that, Delta, and had basically run Florida as a little petri dish. And he did so flouting, you know, vaccine recommendations, mask recommendations, all that stuff in order to get support from weirdo anti-vaxxers who didn't support just common sense health measures that could have saved a lot of people's lives. But I guess that doesn't matter if you're Ron DeSantis. Okay. There's a reason every super cringe news story starts with Florida man. You know what? I will deliver on that one too, because there is another Florida man story here. And you're going to love it. Oh my God. A Florida man was stopped by a police officer for speeding. But don't worry, he had a very, very interesting excuse. Let's take a look.
Sir, I literally saw you run the stop sign.
I'm sorry.
Make the left turn.
I'm sorry, sir.
And then hop on the gas. I was sitting right at the intersection.
I'm so sorry, sir.
So your excuses
I saw a car coming and I...
You didn't, because I was sitting right there.
Well,
I saw
a car
everything.
coming and I wanted to get out before them.
And then you dropped on the gas and took off.
I'm so sorry, sir.
Yeah, there was no reason for that at all. I would put people's lives into safety and
I
everything.
just found out, I'm trying to tell you the truth, guy. I just found out that Putin is just said he's going to launch nuclear thermal war against the world. And I was trying to get back to my house to find out what's going on. I'm freaking out here, guy. Okay? I got people in the Ukraine. They just sent me the insurance card, too.
I'm gonna tell you the truth. Officer is Putin. I was trying to come home because there's going to be a nuclear thermal attack, and I had to get home to see what was going on. Florida. No, this comes from the Flagler County Sheriff's Office. And look, it happened on the day that Russia invaded Ukraine. And so, yeah, that's a great excuse. Guy must have just like heard it on the radio, like, oh, shoot. And I say that because he had a bunch of other funny excuses. Look, the man was driving a 50 and a 30 mile an hour. He ran a stop sign. But then before he blamed Putin, he had this excuse. He claimed that he had just gotten the car today, very likely, and had to get it out of sport mode. Sport mode. Officer, look, I got the car. I didn't know how to take it out of sport mode. I had to go faster, maybe to get it out of sport mode. And then I had to get home because I just heard that Vladimir Putin could nuke my driveway. So I had to I had to figure out what was going on. Florida man. You got to admit the creativity. Obviously, probably very likely got a ticket there. By the way, credit to the officer because he didn't shoot anybody. So that's good. And then, I don't know. Let me just say this. This is, look, Putin may be a lot of things, but he's not somebody who caused you to speed. Not Putin's fault. Florida. Yeah, what is sport mode? Okay. All right, well, look, that's all I got for y'all today. I'll read a couple of the super chats. Let's see. Dr. Zippy Scoot says, since Captain Hot Wheels Cawthorn likes to punch trees and yell for civil war, let's send him to Ukraine to fight the communists. You know what's sad is that I saw a poll earlier today where I think somewhere around 40%, and again, this is not super scientific or anything, but there was a poll that found like the 43 to 46% of Americans think that Russia is still communist. I got news for you. They're authoritarian oligarchs. It's an oligarchy. it's not at all communist. Oh, people, ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. It's like they know absolutely nothing about what's going on in the rest of the world. 11%. Marcus on Left Late Bets. Was I wrong then? I hope so. For God's sakes, I hope that very few people believe that Russia is communist. Holy crap. So 11%, if that's true, it's a little too high. A little too high. All right. Breaking news, Kherson has been officially captured by Russian forces. Casualties are coming in by the minute. Yeah. So I did actually read about that as well earlier. You know, it's a pretty dangerous, disastrous situation that's going on in Ukraine right now. So, all right. Gabby Mathis, thank you for the very kind $5. Really appreciate that. Super chats. Again, that's a way that you can help the show. DJ Big Mikey B, thank you for resubbing with Prime. Appreciate that. 2 months. Hey, thank you so much. Really, really appreciate it. And appreciate you all, those of you on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch. Really, really, really appreciate it. Thank you for watching, for tuning in. We're going to have another great show tomorrow, so of course tune in for that, where we'll have probably some more fun stories and the usual disaster. So let's raid into the Twitchuation room. So that's over on TYT's channel with Francesca Fiorentini. So do that. For everybody else on YouTube and elsewhere, thank you for going around the nation with me today. Love you all, and remember, change begins with you. Good night, nation. We'll see you all tomorrow.
Who's got a hammer? We'll do it live.
Oh no!
They want to make you drink Starbucks every day from now until forever. Sexual anarchy.
Disappointed! Obama! They're kicking me out the door. They're kicking me out the door.